evening, everyone. Excuse me. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Business Industrial Development Authority Board meeting. Today is June 8th. Our meeting is called to order at 6:31 p.m. We shall begin our agenda with our roll call, first with our BIDA members, then Mayor and Council, and any guests that we have attending. My name is Celissa Jefferson. I am your chair, appointee for Ward 4.
My name is Anita Brown Cadis. I am Vice Chair and appointee for Ward 3.
My name is Leslie Zen, BIDA at large.
Lisa Parker. Secretary. Oh, secretaries, Assistant Secretary, Treasurer.
Jamel McKenzie, and I am the appointee for Ward 1.
Bianca Motley Broom, Mayor.
Ambrose Clay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Ken Allen, Councilman, Ward 3.
Dan Lee, attorney for BIDA.
Michelle Alexander, Executive Director for BIDA.
Ben Camber, Project Manager, Economic Development.
Stanley Hawthorne, City Manager.
Good afternoon. I am Mercedes Miller. I'm the Executive Director for the fabulous Georgia International Convention Center, the Gateway Arena at College Park, and the College Park Historic Golf Course.
Hi, I'm Sabretha Beasley, the Administrative Assistant for Economic Development and also the Assistant Secretary Treasurer of BIDA.
Great, thank you, everyone. We have a quorum. Let's begin our agenda by reviewing our review and approval of the minutes for our May 11th, 2023 meeting. I know that our Mayor Pro Temp, Councilman Clay, and our Vice Chair submitted your corrections.
Yes.
I have some corrections, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Okay, I know that Board Member Cadis brought this to our attention on that there were some changes that needed to be done on line 164.
Okay.
However, the address that we voted for in our last meeting, it was not 1996 and 1998 Harvard, but it was 1988 and 1990 Harvard. So we actually voted for addresses that are probably just dirt lots right now. So that needs to be corrected.
Yes, they have both addresses on the documentation. So yeah, it has
1990 and 1988.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
so
well we didn't have it.
I understand, and we'll look at what that means. But it is it is the correct per the tax records.
ID.
Yes, ma'am. But yes, and I didn't raise that it was confusing. I apologize. So that
okay.
to cause you
Sabretha, do you
concern.
need that repeated at all?
No, I'll get it.
Okay.
Okay. And the addresses are outside on the building, 1990, 1998.
But I'm sorry, and just for clarity, which
1988,
one should be
excuse me.
included in the minutes?
Well, that's what I'm just wondering, because when we took the vote for 1996 and 1998. So, Michelle, are you saying that?
Yeah, let me check the input.
Because that's a big difference.
It's the same parcel. That number, those two addresses are both assigned to that property. So I can check with legal what the implications are on the vote, but it is that parcel, and I understand it's on the building. And when you look at the underlying documentation, they have both of them, including when we purchased them, the documentation in our minutes and in the transfer, the deed documents,
Okay.
there's both addresses. So we'll make sure that there's no implication for what your action was.
Okay, again, I just want to make sure that we are clear. I mean, I just don't understand why, if that's the case, that 1988 and 1990 were not included in the paperwork that we were given the night that we made that vote.
So would it be better to include both addresses also known as?
Well,
so
we
that
want to utilize whatever is on the parcel ID on the tax records. That's the correct
That's the only thing that
address,
matters.
yes.
The address doesn't really matter, actually.
Yeah,
That's a
you
good
want to,
point.
yeah, you
Yes,
want to
ma'am, that's a good
utilize what's
point,
on
that
the
we have the
on the
parcel
parcel
ID.
Parcel ID.
But to correct our notes, I think that the minutes, it needs to be notated.
Okay.
The minutes need to reflect what went on at the meeting.
Yeah.
And then if that is incorrect or
Mhm.
something else needs to be done, then further action needs to be taken, but the minutes ought to reflect, and I think
There's
that's
no
what,
Yeah.
what Member McKenzie's saying is that her recollection is what was said at the meeting, and that's what the minutes ought to reflect.
Yes. So you're saying that the minutes does not need to reflect the corrected address?
It needs to reflect what was
What was
done
said
at the
in the
meeting.
meeting? Okay. Okay.
I don't have anything else.
Okay, is that it from everyone else?
May I reiterate mine? I did send them in a message to the entire group, but pertaining to this particular line item also, I think that the motion was for the purpose of historical preservation, or it's not clear. So if that's not what we said in the motion, then I guess we can't change it, but that is clearly what we intended.
I think the motion had the
Historical
historic preservation
preservation.
included in there,
Yes.
but I don't think the motion clarified the exact address. We just,
It just said
for those
historical
parcels
preservation.
related to,
For
exactly,
historic,
for
okay,
historic preservation.
very good. And the rest, I think, if you have any questions.
I do.
Okay. Okay, may I have, would like to request an approval of the minutes from our May 11th, 2023 meeting.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you, that's unanimous. Next, do we have any additions, deletions, and amendments or changes to the agenda? I have one action. Item 4C, under new business, to be transferred to the executive session as item E, and then the litigation updates will be item F.
Madam Chair, the discussion of contract is not available for executive session.
And why would that be?
Law doesn't allow it. It's not personnel, it's not litigation, and it's not real estate.
Well, isn't it personnel?
It is not.
Well, so this is an action item that was committed from last year as a review of when we had it in executive session, the contract. So why in 2022 it was in executive session, in 2023 it is not allowed?
Have no idea. But it's not, it's not legal.
So even though it's dealing with personnel staff,
It is not dealing with personnel. BIDA doesn't have any employees, so personnel would not be available for executive session.
well, BIDA does have personnel. We hire an attorney to work for BIDA.
I'm not
under a
personnel under the law.
contract.
I'm a contract employee.
Yes, which is a part of staff, which is a part of our bylaws.
It is not.
So, you know, I disagree with this, so I would like to call a motion to move the item to executive session to be discussed as an item under executive section.
So, just clarification, are you saying that, from what I heard Attorney Lee say, is that contracts can't go into executive session? So are you
Yeah.
are you just
Are you
stating that you
stating
want to
that-
do something different and discuss personnel? Because from what I'm hearing, I don't know if there's, that contract is not something that we can move to executive session, so. But I mean, unless there's, I don't know.
Well, what I'm keeping it consistent is the action item from 2022 was that we bring a mid-year review for this year from that executive session procedure. So I'm keeping that consistency. So this is from the 2022 action of the review of the contract and review of personnel. So I request a motion to move it to executive session.
Can I ask for clarity about what we are going to discuss? Are we going to review the performance of our currently contracted attorney in this? And if so, then I would say that is confidential.
Yes.
And needs to be done, not in an open.
In a regular session, exactly. Correct.
Can we reword?
I have a
I'm not
motion.
an attorney, and I don't think anyone in here is an attorney except for Dan. So if we're,
well, you're sitting next to
Well,
one.
excuse me, I have a motion on the floor.
It's out of
I'm
order.
I'm asking for a motion.
I'm sorry, did you just let Jamel make a comment and Anita, but I'm not allowed to make a comment?
No, I didn't say that at all. I just said that I asked for a motion on the floor. You made a comment, but a motion had been made.
No,
It hasn't been
has
made, it
not.
has been requested. I'm asking, do we have a motion to move this item to executive session?
I'd like to hear what Leslie has to say.
Well, my thing is that I don't want to make a legal determination when no one is qualified. So if you want to move it to executive session, I would suggest that you seek push it off till the next meeting and seek legal counsel in the meantime.
So due to the fact that we don't have a second motion to move the request, that motion dies, and we will leave it in regular session to be discussed. Oh, are we moving on? Yes, we're moving on. That was the only change, if it had been seconded. Our next item for new business is our presentation by the FOA group. Do they need a mic? No. Does she need a microphone? Is there a microphone available? Oh, at the podium, yes.
I'm Gloria Robinson Abdullah. I serve as the chairperson for FOA. Can you hear me now? Okay. Good evening. My name is Gloria Robinson Abdullah. I serve
Excuse me, Miss Gloria. The mic, is it turned down? If we can have assistance.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Gloria Robinson Abdullah. I serve as the chairperson for FOA. And I want to thank you all for the opportunity to address this committee this evening. I will start off with giving a brief history. The Airport Abatement Program erased years of success in the original African-American community of College Park, which is now known as 6 West and was formerly known as Ward 2. Within that 1 square mile, this one's, is that better? Okay. Within 1 square mile, this once thriving community was a place of great possibilities and achievements, places to work, places to live, places to learn, places to shop, places to play, and places to worship. This community was created by its citizens, whereby identity and pride emerged. This community was a group of people that cared about each other, had a sense of belonging due to their sense of shared values and goals. This community also had emotional connections, which reminds me of a scripture, 1 Corinthians 12:12, which states, "We are one body." We would like to share some elements of this once wholesome community. Okay. During segregation and period thereafter, African Americans had limitations on what public spaces they could enter. Barbershops in African American communities were places not only to get a shave and a haircut, but also served as a meeting place where black men would gather without worry or inhibitions, where they could come together to seek counsel, share information, where they could laugh at stale jokes, play checkers or dominoes, hold in-depth conversations about social issues that affect the communities, and agree on workable solutions. For more than 66 years, Price Barbershop was a beacon of hope and inspiration in our community. Okay, Mr. C. Ronnie Wynn had a mobile store in which he would bring wares to those in the neighborhood, or one could go to his home. His mother was a dear lady who supported the community. If you didn't have enough money at the time for the things you needed, you didn't leave her home without them. She would just allow you to pay her later. Mr. Rufus Bussey was the proprietor of a grocery store, automotive business, and gas station. Mr. Bussey was a dedicated church member who served the community well. He would have groceries delivered to those in need or those who were unable to come to his store. He sponsored the baseball team, Negro League College Park Indians, so they would have the uniforms and equipment to compete. Having what you needed, I'm sure, increased those young players' self-esteem and ability to compete with pride. Banks Funeral Home was initially located on Coney Street. The updated building was located on West Harvard. Mr. Nathaniel Banks was the owner, and he was also the funeral director, but his services include providing transportation to hospitals, what we know today as non-emergent ambulance services. There were instances where families didn't have enough money for funeral services. Mr. Banks would provide those services. Mount Zion AME Church was one of the many places to worship in the neighborhood. Mount Zion was with its majestic architecture, was the church home for young Creflo Dollar, who was raised in our community. Not shown is Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist Church, which was formerly located in our community on Zion Avenue, presently located at 2044 J.T. Alexander Avenue, near College View Cemetery. Martin Luther King Jr., at the age of 14 years old, attended conferences at the church with his father, Martin Luther King Sr., who was a former pastor of Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church. Greer Calf Stand was located in a room behind Price's Barbershop. Mr. Ike Greer was the owner. His cab company provided transportation to persons who need to go to various places around the city and outside the city. It was also a meeting spot for the men in the community. Mr. Ike's son, Charles Greer, was a defensive back for the Denver Broncos. Eva Thomas High School, named after the prominent citizen and educator, was a place of learning. Not only was it a place of learning, but it was also a place where the teenagers delighted in high school activities such as proms, talent shows, chorus band, and during football season, homecoming activities. These lovely ladies was a part of the 1969 homecoming corps. Brady Recreation Center provided many activities for the children and youth in the community, such as scouting programs, sock hops for the teenagers, sporting teams, and summer day camps where youth in the community were provided summer jobs through Economic Opportunity Atlanta. Wayman and Bessie Brady didn't want any child to be left behind. When we were in their presence, they were our mom and dad. The City of College Park renamed the first public housing projects that were located on West Columbia and Rose Street after its civic leader, Ms. Lottie Miller. Dedication ceremonies by Councilman Johnny Robinson and Councilman Anthony Hightower. This set of housing was torn down due to airport abatement program. Because of segregation, African Americans were not allowed to play sports with or against white players. College Park had a Negro League, the College Park Indians, that became all Dixie champions. We would like to thank the Mayor Motley Broom, council members, and BIDA for their support in saving Price Barbershop and adjacent house from being sold or torn down. Going forward, we would like Price Barbershop and the house next to it to be declared historical landmarks. We would like to be assured that they are restored and slated as a museum for tourism, solely depicting the lives of the indigenous families that occupied the area now known as 6 West, with their histories and artifacts. Lastly, and importantly, we would like Price Barbershop and the house next to it to remain at their present location. Thank you, and I appreciate you hearing us this evening.
Thank you very much for group for that wonderful presentation. I mean, I was thoroughly impressed. The years that I've been in College Park, I did not know majority of that information that you presented. You know, we cannot evolve as a city if we cannot reflect on our past in order for us to progress into the future. Are there any questions from the board for the, am I pronouncing it correctly? FOA group.
Madam Chair, I wanted to make a couple comments. I've been working with these guys well, since the very beginning. And as everybody knows, there was a whole parallel community here. And I had the honor of delivering the 100th anniversary proclamation for Mount Calvary Church. And Reverend Crumming, God rest his soul, was an amazing guy. And I think he'd be proud.
Very much so.
If we could carry on, excuse me, this heritage and remember it. And one time we talked about putting it on, literally putting it on the map as a visitor's area, and that would enable us to do something with the old cemetery there, and Mayor Longineau brought the goats in to clear the cemetery. So we've been trying for a long time to make something happen, get a grant there, what have you. So that's why Mayor and Council supported the idea of taking it off the roster, the list of the properties available, sorry. And I would even suggest maybe going forward that since this is historic preservation as opposed to economic development, that perhaps it should be transferred back to the city as part of that. That's not the primary thing that's being asked tonight. The primary thing is get it off the sales agenda. We don't want it, certainly don't want it sold. But you might want to consider, and I'll ask Attorney Lee, is the historic preservation within the scope of BIDA, or is it more appropriate to have it in the city's bailiwick?
That's a tough call. You know, I would tell you that in a lot of places, a treasure like that is seen as a draw for tourism, which is obviously an economic development product. So it's a judgment call. which way you go with it. We discussed this last meeting, and some of the discussion centered around where would the money come from. And the current structure, financial structure of the dynamic between BIDA and the city has always been that the city is the funder of such things as this, like the purchase of properties and the like. And that was the reason I think it came up last time. But it as a tourism mechanism, I think it could fit either way.
Could go either way.
Yes, sir.
Did you finish? I didn't want to speak. Were you finished?
I'm sorry, I can't.
Were you finished, Councilman Clay?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I just wanted to make a different comment, but then also come back to that. I also want to commend this group for the work that you've done, and thank you, Councilman Clay, for working with them. I've had a chance to speak to everybody that's here today, and this is definitely something I think, I'm sure that a project such as this is really going to be just something that we need to have in 6 West. How can we build what we're building in 6 West and not recognize the accomplishments and the people that were there? And I want to say to Ms. Adula, I said your name right? Okay. That thank you for that presentation. Thank you for really helping out. The presentation helped us to really get the feel of what was there, and to even want even more for me to honor that. So, Madam Chair, I don't know if I would like to even make a motion at this time that we do proceed as BIDA with this property, to let it remain exactly where it is, and to go about whatever needs to be done, that this property is used for tourism. And in fact, Dan Lee's already gave me a couple of ideas while we were sitting here. So that's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion?
This is different. This is not to take it off the sale roster. This is now for BIDA to move forward, for us to move forward with this as a project of tourism, and to what Dan Lee was saying, so that we can now identify what will be done with the project.
Okay, okay, so you reiterated the motion. Councilman Mayor Pro Tem second. All in favor?
Discussion?
We're in the middle of the motion.
Discussion on the motion.
We're in the middle of the vote, so he would have had to add discussion to his motion, and he didn't.
No, once a motion is made and
Yes.
seconded, then it is open for discussion.
Wasn't a vote.
All motions except to adjourn or debate on Robert's Rules of Order.
We've got to get that clear as a
Yeah,
city.
we have to get that clarity. We have to get clarity there, because normally if you're in the middle of a vote, when it's,
She was saying, she
I
said
would,
those in
he
favor.
seconded the vote. He seconded the motion. So we were asking
And then
for
she
the
called
vote.
the vote.
I called the vote.
Madam Chair, the proper procedure under the Robert's Rules of Order, which are part of the BIDA charter, are that once a motion is made and is seconded, the floor is open for debate.
Okay, so the Robert rules specifically state that you have to call it with discussion, his second, for it to be discussed. You're in the middle of a motion. If I call it to be voted, Mayor Pro Tem seconded without discussion. I called it for a vote.
I don't want to argue with you. I'm just telling you what the rule says. Technically, you're not supposed to even discuss it until this motion is made and the second is had. But then it would be, and I would
But I called the vote after his second. So that's what I'm saying.
I would add to it with the caveat, why wouldn't you discuss it? Why would you vote on something without discussing it? It's a good rule, honestly.
Which I understand, but in our previous, administrations of having these meetings, once the second is called, once the second is done, and then I call for a vote, unless you caveat the second with the discussion.
Madam Chair, I will withdraw my second and restate it and request discussion on the motion.
Thank you.
Discussion on the motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
At the last meeting, we made a motion to take it off the rolls for the purposes of historical preservation. So tonight's motion, I'm a little unclear about in terms of how that relates to what we did at the last meeting. I think that everyone is on board for making sure that we preserve this property and move it forward as the best possible testament and monument to the community that was displaced as a result of airport expansion. I need a little bit more clarity on what that looks like, because BIDA itself, as Attorney Lee noted, does not have employees. The city staff would be engaged in doing this work. And so to Councilman Clay's point, even for the purposes of getting it where it needs to be and having it be the historical preservation and tourism property that we want it to be, it would seem to make sense at some point that the city actually be in the position of ownership of that property, even if it transfers back to BIDA for
Can
the
I
ultimate
respond
use
to that
moving
since
forward.
I made the motion?
Yes.
And basically, it's two different things. Last meeting, we said historical preservation, and it still is going to be restored as a historical site. Okay, so that is done. So that's apples and oranges. So the motion today is just saying that moving forward, that BIDA will hold it. Perfect example of what BIDA does is this is the GICC. This is a BIDA property, okay? BIDA did this project. There are employees here that are employees of the city of College Park, but BIDA is the one that saw the projects through. Same thing with the arena. So we do have properties throughout the city that BIDA has been involved in the development of, and they have remained. I can't even think of too many any instances, unless you can name them to me, in the city where the city was given back a property and then gave it back to BIDA for it to be developed. So to me, that's like a unnecessary move. We have the ability to see the project through. The project will be seen the same way the GICC was seen through, same way the Gateway Arena. But now the motion today is actually stating that instead of just historical preservation, that this property will be used for tourism, because this is going to be a tourist attraction along with probably any other projects that are restored in this process. So that is the clarification for the motion that was made.
Jamel, well, I'm not sure, maybe the question should go to Dan. Does the funding, TPD funding, tourist product development funding, that goes through the city, not through BIDA? So if we wanted to develop it as a tourist attraction, I'd sort of shudder at the word attraction, but historical heritage attraction, then we could use city money to do that, whereas BIDA doesn't directly have that money to do that.
And I agree with that, you know, but at the same time, I guess I'll take it back to the GICC project, and, you know, or even what we're doing with Lottie Miller, or just different things that we have, the two organizations have worked together. The funding usually goes to the city. BIDA just has to approve those bonds. So I don't see a big difference. I just don't understand the importance of transferring it to the city and then just leave it with BIDA.
Well, I think the first, maybe we, Sabritha, can you restate the motion as it stands right now? Because I think maybe we need to clarify the motion. I don't know.
It says, make a motion to proceed in the processing of the transition for the barbershop to be used as a historic preservation site.
That's the motion from last week, or that's, yeah, that's not
That's
the,
what I'm
okay.
seeking to say today. Because last week we took it off the sale.
I mean, last month.
Last month took it off the sale, and this month you're saying to specify that it be used for the barbershop.
I don't know what BIDA.
The barbershop be used for historic preservation.
I didn't say historic preservation, I
Yeah.
said tourism.
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 Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Oh, yeah, I do have tourism, I'm sorry.
I think she included
Reserved for
the
the tourism.
property
Do you
next
wanna
door
add
too.
specifically for FOA, or just leave it for tourism? For the motion?
For the org-
preservation. It says, the motion to proceed in the preservation of the barber shop for tourism. For FOA, because I didn't hear that.
Well,
It's really, FOA is the one bringing us the project, but this is actually going to be a college park, meaning they're the ones that opened up our eyes. I don't think that they are expecting to actually do this project. I mean, you all can correct me if, do you all have funding or some type of plan? Okay.
So just leave it general for tourism, preservation for tourism.
Okay, our vice chair had raised her hand to speak.
I think we're trying to make a lot of decisions around the table and with open discussion. I think that we're all in agreement that it's an important project. The mechanism of it and how it gets carried out, I don't think it's wise for us to discuss that and finalize it today. And I would propose that once we've decided that this is what we're going to do, we either call a working group to determine the best route. I have no judgment at present about even what the funding opportunities are, and I'm sure we all have rich resources to bring to the table about that. So I would suggest that once we've decided this, the next step is to present a proposal for funding, for implementation, that is comprised of all stakeholders, and that includes BIDA, of course, the city, as well as the citizens who are here.
I think a key element of that is, at least when I saw it, my biggest concern was to not have it demolished,
Right.
not have it uprooted, not have anything happen to it. Leave it in the location it's in, which is what I think the ladies requested. And I think that's my biggest concern, that it be preserved, not tampered with, et cetera, et cetera. So if that is an understanding of the motion, I think we ought to basically maybe even include that in the motion, revise the motion to say, maintain it for historical purposes, tourism purposes, if you will, Jamel, in the location where it is right now, both those two properties.
Okay.
Okay,
Correct.
And I'm fine with that. Even though I made the motion, I'm definitely fine with it being revised.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay,
And I'm obviously fine with it as
okay, great. So does,
So what is the new motion?
so
I'm
does
sorry.
that, Sabretha, can you reiterate
I need
the
clarity.
motion?
Jamil is making a motion, provided to proceed in the preservation of the Price Barbershop and the house next door for tourism.
and it will be left in the same location and intact. In other words, not sold, not,
Okay.
Isn't that what preservation
There was
means?
one word that I had in there that Attorney Lee just reminded me.
What was that?
So basically, that we would proceed with
Yes.
making it,
To proceed
yes,
in preserving the Price Barbershop and the house next to it
yes, ma'am.
for tourism and left in the same location and intact,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Okay, great. So we had the second with discussion. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you all again.
Okay, now we have our broker selection update by Michelle Alexander.
Thank you. First, I want to thank everyone who participated on the evaluation team to score all of our candidates, and thank you for attending the special called meeting to interview 3 of the top scoring candidates. At that meeting, the board instructed us to proceed with negotiations with Stream Realty We received today a draft contract, so your team will be reviewing that with legal, as well as the negotiation and clarity exactly on the market deliverables and any costs associated, if it's separate, because there shouldn't be based on the commission rates that we receive from them, but we'll bring back to you the full report once we dig deep with Stream. So we'd like to be able to bring to you, well, we plan to bring to you next month then a contract for execution. I was hoping we could do it a little faster, but unless we'd have another, I know we already had special called meetings, so we'll just bring it to you for review and signature at the next meeting.
So at the next meeting?
At the next
Okay.
meeting, the contract.
Okay. Are there any questions in regards to the broker selection update? Hearing none, let's move on to item C, the BIDA attorney contract review. As stated previously, I wanted this to be added to the agenda because it was a requested item from our 2022 meeting with a review of the contract being month to month and requesting a mid-year review for this year. So basically, I need clarification and understanding that, you know, the pro forma issues with the contract, this contract is from 2018 to 2019, and in 2022, we had said that we would enter into a month-to-month contract, but according to this contract, that you need any extensions or any extensions within 30 days in written form. But the contract presented in our packet was from 2018 and 2019. Do we have a current contract in place?
What we discussed at the meeting, I think it was August or September, one of my first meetings, that we've been operating month to month under the terms of this, and it's been the de facto, and that we were not actually bringing back to you a contract. I did not have an instruction to create a contract that was going to state that it was month to month. That was not the recollection of our instruction.
And there's another missing element of that, and it's something that needs to be said very quickly. Not only did you not do a new document back whenever you brought this up before, you didn't tell your lawyer. Nobody's ever said to Dan Lee, going forward, this is a month-to-month contract. And you know, I'm a simple guy, and I'm a very plain-spoken person. If you got a problem with your lawyer, you ought to say something to your lawyer. Just like this conversation you have now about a month-to-month contract. You didn't even mention it to me, who is the lawyer. Now, wouldn't you think that would be very important in the discussion?
That's the reason why I brought it in for review, Dan. I think that it's necessary. We're entering in an engagement for a broker selection.
I'm not your broker.
I understand that, but what I'm explaining to you is that that's the reason why I brought it in for review. We're currently sitting here stating that the contract is month to month, but if you're stating that it wasn't disclosed to you that you have a month-to-month contract, then how are we under representation?
Because you have an original contract that stays in place. And I would also add to the fact that under Georgia bar rules, you can get rid of your lawyer anytime you want to. Contract is just more or less a courtesy. And quite frankly, Madam Chairperson, that's what this discussion lacks, is a courtesy. If you've got a problem with your lawyer, you're the fourth chairperson I've represented on this body.
Yes.
And I've had a great working relationship with the others, and any comment, any complaint, they're willing to call me. Not only have you not said a word to me, questioning my ability, questioning my deliverance of ability to this body, but you didn't even mention what you talked about in the last meeting, except here to ask if there's been a written document about a month-to-month contract.
Well, that's the reason why I brought it forth, because according to your pro forma in your contract, you are supposed to have monthly status update reports with me. I have yet to receive a phone call from you. We have only had email communication dealing with different other scenarios. And that's my concern as well. So I think that as we sit here and we go forward, let's get this correct. Let's do it the proper way so
Well,
that we have established representation.
The problem
and
that's
the
going
pro
to
forma
be,
is being, followed accordingly from the contract.
here's the problem with that. And I've been practicing law 38 years. If you have to defend yourself with your client, then you're in the wrong spot. To change this communication problem, and I'm going to be very blunt with you, is not the lawyer's fault.
Well, either someone has had to take the initiative, and according to your contract, you are supposed to take the initiative. If this opportunity of this contract presented itself in 2022, which clearly stated you were on a month-to-month, why wasn't that brought forward to the executive director of the Economic Development Group? Why wasn't it disclosed?
Because the chairperson didn't say anything about it. Because you did it in secret, and you shouldn't have had it in secret. You should have had it in an open meeting, just like this is. That's one reason.
Can I make a suggestion? Can I suggest, I don't know, maybe too late because we've already gone through additions, deletions, amendments, or changes to the agenda, but can we table this perhaps and then have something set up for the two of you to communicate?
Well, I think
because
that,
we're kind of having a meeting, but it's a communication between the two of you, unless somebody else wants to.
Which I understand, but I think that this is needed for discussion. And one moment, Madam Vice Chair. This is needed for discussion, and I think that if we do decide to table this, it's on our agenda. I tried to move it to executive session to me, where I felt that it should have been discussed, but since we're discussing it in regular session, then this is a meeting that needs to be had with our Economic Development Director to get us in full representation correctly. Because as the attorney stated, he's going under a month-to-month, and if this contract is to continue, according to this contract, his month-to-month is supposed to be in writing within 30 days.
The contract doesn't say anything about month-to-month.
It says extensions. So if it's extended, that's a part of your extension. And it was supposed to be in writing.
That's not accurate.
Madam Chair. I too suggest that at this point we're talking about, if I'm using the term correctly, a pro forma review of this position, taking the personalities and the people out of it. If we can do that in an open session and we can look at the contract and determine what the needs for an attorney for BIDA have been in the past historically, I'm not sure, and I've been on BIDA a year, that it's ever been explained to me what the role of the attorney is vis-a-vis or our relationship. So clearly we need a pro forma session to determine what the parameters of that relationship are. It has not been done. If we can do that in open session, now may not be the time to do that, but it needs to be done. I would be concerned if I were in the position that you're in, that I have a clear relationship with the body. You may think that you do, but I'm not sure that we do. So if that's the discussion that needs to be had and this is not the place to do it, then I suggest we do that and then come back to have whatever further discussion. Clearly we're not ready unless we all have paper in front of us that outlines the contract that the attorney has with BIDA, and I don't have that information.
Well, the current contract that we have in front of us clearly, discloses the actionable items that are needed. We are here as a board to discuss protocol, policies, procedures, and processes, okay? And we have got to get to the point where we're doing things appropriately. And we don't leave opportunities or loopholes to, prevent litigations. And it's very imperative as we go forward, like we just went through the RFQ with the commercial broker, it's very imperative for us to get this together. So now it's being brought forth to the table. I think we have a, understanding that we have some pro forma actions that needs to be examined with our current attorney's contract.
So, Madam Chair, may I? So, I guess the reason I said table it is because on the actual agenda, it says contract discussion.
Contract
And I
review.
don't think any of us, unless somebody is prepared to have a pro forma, anything but a contract discussion, whatever that may be. Now, I will say in the way of contract, something needs to be done because it has been 2018 since this contract was put together, and I would hate to be in a position where for how many years are we talking now? Maybe 4 or 5 years of being on a month-to-month? So we definitely need to revisit the contract. We definitely, and I don't know if it's that we want to look at the contract not in terms of Attorney Lee, not attaching him so much to the contract, but looking at what it is, what the contractual obligation that we want to have for an attorney. So it's like two things. One is a contract for Dan, but also I think what I'm hearing is getting it clear what the expectation is for our contracted attorney. But like I said, my biggest thing right now is that I think that something should be done because this is way too long. And this is an outdated contract. It's 5 years old. I mean, wait, it's 6. I can't even add it all. It's too many numbers for me. So it definitely needs to be reviewed. That's my opinion. The contract itself. I'm not talking about the attorney. I'm talking about the contract.
Madam Chair, I
Yes.
largely agree with Jamel. I think I'm one to put the elephant in the middle of the table. I think we've got two issues here. One is we're working with an outdated contract.
Yes.
If for no other reason than appearances, it ought to be updated, and I agree with Salisha on that. That it makes us look like we're operating under flaky procedures,
Exactly.
or what have you. Pardon my simplification. The second issue that I'm hearing is, do we have a good relationship with our city attorney? And I think that's our BIDA attorney, I should say, that I think that's the second issue. I can't answer that question. I mean, personally, I've only been on BIDA every several years. I am not a permanent member, just like no other mayor pro tem is. I can only say, and I don't know whether it's appropriate for me to say it, but I'm going to say it. At this time, I think Dan, from what I've seen over the years, is the best BIDA attorney that we've had. Now, you know, that's just my personal opinion, and I'm only one vote, and I'm only one vote this year, by the way. So I think those are the two issues, and I think the board has to make, I would agree, I think the contract needs to be cleaned up.
Yes.
Whether it is truly meaningful is another issue, but I think it needs to be cleaned up. Personally, I think that the board has to decide, is Dan the right attorney for this board? So far, all I can say is, from my experiences, we went from contracts that everyone was a new and unique thing to contracts that were consistent, to contracts that I could go through and review, and I could expect to find the same paragraph on the same point of view, whether it's returning the property to BIDA if they fail to meet a certain date or anything else along that line. We had a consistent approach to doing things, which made my review a heck of a lot easier, and it gave us a standardized opinion. Dan has made that happen, and but I can't speak to his. Dan and I don't normally communicate, and you guys communicate. I can't speak to that relationship, and I can't speak to the relationship in the opinion of the other members of the board. But come on, these are the two issues we got to deal with, and I wanted to clearly state the second issue, which is the elephant in the room.
Exactly. And thank you. I, as chair of this board, you know, I'm not political. I'm a business owner. I handle business. And what I like to see is full representation based on policy and procedures. And this is what we need. And granted, the purpose of this review is to specifically speak to the fact that we do not have a current contract in place. And it's been several years.
But Attorney Lee just said that we can fire him at any time. I agree that a contract should be in place, but really it's meaningless.
Well, it's not meaningless if anything should come up in litigation and it's requested for a contract to be presented, and we can't do it.
Give me a scenario where that would come up.
Well, I'm just saying, with any of our litigations.
They would ask to see if there's a contract in place with our attorney?
It could be.
Right.
Wouldn't even be legal.
Where I came, oh, sorry, go ahead.
But the fact of the matter is, as a vendor of this board, it needs to be in a current contract. And that needs to be adhered to. And
Okay,
we
I
should
make a
not-
motion to update the current contract to present time.
Second.
I have well, she didn't ask discussion.
Discussion.
We were still talking actually before the motion was
Exactly.
made, so Anita had something and then I had something I wanted to say.
Well, I suggest we back off to a pro forma review of whatever contract is needed between BIDA and an attorney. And since we don't employ you anyway, clearly, you know, that has to be taken into consideration. Because if you are not a BIDA employee, then what difference does it make? But I think we need to have certain what would you change about anything that you are doing right now? That might be that's a rhetorical question right now. But you having been in this position since 2019 or whatever, I'd like to know from you what works and what doesn't work, and how has it been? So that's the performance review. But right now, can we back off and just talk objectively about what we need in an attorney as BIDA, and how we need to lay that out for the coming years as opposed to the past 5 years? I would be satisfied with that.
And based on, you're rhetorical, so based on what Anita is saying, my suggestion is that we don't make any kind of move today in the meeting, and because there's still some things that need to be determined in terms of if you're going to update a contract, are we trying to put some things in the contract that we may decide that we need in an attorney, or hear from Dan? I mean, is there input necessary from Dan and input necessary from the board? It's going to be hard to update this contract without us getting that input. So I would suggest, Leslie, that we table this whole entire thing and go back, look at that. But I will say this much. This contract, to me, it does need to be updated. If Dan is going to remain our attorney, I don't, you know, he may say he doesn't need a contract, but this contract has a rate. Even the rate is incorrect at what we're paying him right now. So legally speaking, we don't have anything to reflect except for minutes from a meeting that there was an increase in the hourly wage, the hourly contractual, it's not a wage, whatever, maybe it is considered a wage, the fee that we're paying the attorney. So this definitely has to be done. But do we need to do it right now? I would say let's have a couple of conversations. Doesn't have to even be an entire board. The chair can meet with the attorney. There can be a committee formed to meet, but we do not need to make a decision at this point. That's my fault.
I'd like to be on the committee.
Okay, so, and I don't need to be on the
But
committee.
Wait, we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah,
But Michelle, you wanted to make a comment?
Well, I guess I wanted, because you had mentioned earlier, Madam Chair, what you wanted from your executive director as it relates to this matter. So when this was discussed last year, the decision was to continue as is. And I know it's not common necessarily for the folks at this table, but for many governments I work for, that's how many contracts are. They wind up being de facto. You actually, by the fact of us, and that is your staff person, paying that bill that is invoiced, and as I look at all of the requirements of the attorney have monthly project reports, meeting monthly with the executive director, you know, all those things that you put me in charge of to make sure are happening. I'll need to hear from you what you don't see happening, and I haven't heard that from anyone. Since August, since I've been here, any of these items not occurring. So that'll be helpful for me as the staff responsible to execute this review. And then the other has to do with your concern about the legal status. We wouldn't be functioning if this were not a legal way to do the business, I assure you. And I just want to be clear that I understand the statement, yes, let's hear the direction, and I'm here to execute your will, what you decide.
Yes.
If you want to update and say, okay, we want a year to year, we want it 1 year, renewable every year, then let's put some of those specifics, even as you're still wrestling with, it sounds like, but I don't know, because I haven't heard what's not happening, and if you think you need anything different than this set of scope and deliverables.
Well, yes, so, you know,
If
there,
makes sense.
and it makes sense. However, if the 2022 vote was to go month to month and is de facto, then that means that this contract is still in place, but we're still out of order, out of pro forma, because it specifically states for any extensions to be in writing within 30 days. So if that was never received, we are here, and that's why we're here discussing this. In reference to, it also does not mention anything about how records are being kept. Should anything happen with the records of our litigation and our updates, we're supposed to receive monthly status reports as well from the attorney. That has not been adhered to. So if we, I know that there's a motion on the floor, but there are several pro forma issues that are in here that we need to align ourselves with what's currently taking place with the business in the city and as well as this board, and having full representation. Yes.
I just wanted to make 2 quick points, and one of them Michelle did cover. Yeah, the contract is expired and outdated, but there is a de facto contract. It's an unwritten contract. If someone is taking monthly checks from us and accepting those checks, you know, if things got into a court of law, they're going to say, well, if one party was giving checks and the other one was accepting the monthly, that's going to be an unwritten contract of a month-to-month contract. But obviously it needs to be fixed. The other thing is, I think the question came up in terms of who does the BIDA attorney work for? Going by this contract, from what I see, I don't see the only signature from the city of College Park on here is the BIDA chairman, who was John Ritt then. It's witnessed by the city clerk, but the mayor's signature is not on here. It's not, the city manager's signature is not on here. So I guess who does the attorney work for? If someone looked at this contract, they would have to assume it must be BIDA, because the first sentence is the agreement is between College Park Business and Industrial Development Authority and Freeman Mathis Gary, not the city of College Park. So exactly. I think it's just some homework and admin work that hasn't been done, that needed to be done, that you didn't want to have to, I guess, you know, some issues you don't want to have to necessarily deal with when you're busy, but at this point you got to deal with it. Now I don't have a dog in the fight, but I just wanted to make those 2 points.
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Okay. Here's my thing. Okay, we're saying, you know, my question is, why not have a contract? You know, we can make up all the excuses, and I know Dan doesn't give a flip-flop whether or not this contract gets done. He's going to continue to do the work. But as a city, why would we not do it? This is just a simple, like, change a date, so meaning my organization, our contract ends with the city of College Park this month. But I've been a contractor, we've had a contract with the city of College Park since 2019. And every single year, we have to go back before the city and get that contract renewed. And I think that's how it works with most vendors or most contractors with the city of College Park. Why should BIDA operate any different than the city? So that's the premise I'm coming from. Mine has nothing to do with Dan Lee. Mine has to do with a contract. I just think it's fair when you have somebody that's working for you, to let them know that they are more important to you than a month-to-month contractor. So that's where I'm coming from. I don't want somebody every month wondering, am I going to be fired? And I know we could do it. We could still do it, but a contract ensures you
No,
that.
it doesn't.
Well, you can fight it. You can legally. We've got 3 attorneys in here today. If I have a contract with you and you go nilly on the contract, I have the right to sue or do whatever it is, take legal action. And can one of the attorneys correct me on that?
You're wrong.
So you
I do not.
You don't. So basically, our city's being sued by a person that was an employee. Oh, you're saying because of the contractor?
No, because we're
As
lawyers.
an attorney.
Lawyer, you can terminate my.
Oh, okay, because he's an attorney. I'm
he's an
talking
attorney.
from the standpoint of a contract. He may be a licensed attorney, but do we, with the city attorney, do we recontract and do a new contract with the city attorney every year?
I've represented, I've been doing this 38 years, I've been representing lots of
Okay,
entities.
so I'm gonna stop fighting for you, that's all.
No,
I'm just
I'm just telling you.
That's it. I'm explaining because this is just how I feel that it's the right and
There's
proper
nothing
thing to
wrong
do.
with that.
Give somebody more
And
than
I
a
don't
30
mean any
days.
disrespect to you, I appreciate it. There is nothing wrong with having a indated contract and not having an outdated contract. My concern is that I've not had one complaint. If the contract is out of date and you wanted a new one, you should have said, hey, Dan, you're the lawyer. Why don't you draft a new contract that has the right dates in it? Nobody has said that. Not one person.
That's why we're having the review.
Madam Chair, may I say
That's
something?
not why we're having it. That's the point.
That is, okay, so.
When we
what's
bring
your
up
opinion?
stuff to be discussed, we get a whole packet
Yes.
that discusses what we're going to be discussing, shows us what the plots are, there's nothing in here about why we're bringing this up.
It says a review.
Well, and then you would give the data as to what are your concerns.
That's what we're here to
No,
discuss as a board.
before we come, so we can come prepared.
No, it says a review. It failed in line with the 2022 action that was brought forth in the executive session for a review of the contract. It's the exact same title. So it's a continuation because that action item asks for a mid-year review. And that's just where we are. We're mid-year and we're asking for a review.
Well, I was just going to reiterate that point. Review means review. So that's what we're doing
Yes.
now. Unless we're going to go point by point, I think we've decided we're going to back off. We're going to do that in another way, and we'll come back.
We're
with
going to do what in
reviews.
another way?
A review of the attorney contract to make sure that what was written in 2019 is still what we need.
See, if this had been presented, I know that the contract was in here, but your concerns, and now we're going to bring it back to another meeting. We're going to spend another hour discussing this. And in a way, I find it's insulting to Dan Lee. We did the same thing 6 months ago, blindsided him.
As the BIDA chair, and when you're working with any staff that is hired and any vendor that is hired for representation of this board, it is more an imperative that a review is brought before the board.
Okay,
As a
but we are
discussion.
sitting here as a board, and we're going to now
Yes.
table it. We're going to discuss it.
And that's a
but-
part
and-
of the ramification. I
And
was
then we're
not
going to bring
finished.
it back.
I was not finished. That's a part of the whole purpose of having a review for discussion. And if you're coming to a resolve and that comes out of that discussion, that resolve, that's so be it. But we have a motion on the floor, and there
Could
was
you
a
restate the
second by the mayor. All those in favor
Could you,
with the,
could you
oh,
restate the motion,
restate
please?
the motion.
Restate the motion.
Sabrina.
Leslie made a motion to update the contract to the current one.
No, to the current
Sorry, those
date.
are notes.
It was second by the mayor. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. Any abstentions?
What was the, wait a minute. Was the motion stated?
Yes, she stated it.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Okay.
I'm
Sabretha,
sorry.
can you reiterate the motion?
A lot of notes here. Leslie made.
What
was
I
Leslie
said
made the
to
motion.
update the,
The motion says here, motion to update the contract to the current one.
to the current date,
Date.
to
Current
make
date.
it current.
Okay. I would, that is, no.
It was second by the mayor. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, raise your hand. And any, opposed, and any abstentions?
I didn't get Lisa's.
Lisa's abstaining.
Are you abstaining? Okay,
That's
so
what the
you're,
motion is, to
That's what the
update the
motion is.
current
I-
contract. Are you voting in favor?
so in favor, we have 1, 2, can you keep your hands raised, 1, 2, 3, 4? And opposed, we have 3, so the motion passes. The next item on the agenda is the strategic planning meeting update.
So, Madam Chair, I have no further updates except that from last time, that we are working with the Carl Vinson leadership. She hasn't given me a specific date. She was still saying end of August, first week of September, so we can have our training with her.
Okay, and I also, I didn't have an opportunity to update you. I reached out to her as well, and I received her assistant, Lori, and she said that she can, I'll send you her contact information, that her training is not available until August or September, but Lori can come in for our strategic planning meeting and update us on the compliance and the bylaws in the state. They can do that review.
Oh, well, I wish you
With
had let
us.
me know that, because when I
Yes.
spoke to her, we went through the agenda
Mhm.
of exactly that, and she said she needed to prepare that curriculum, but you're saying her assistant is going to take care of it for her?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, so I will pass that information. She, before the meeting, she emailed that to me. That
Oh,
she's
thanks
able
for
to
letting me know.
provide that. Okay. Are there any other questions in regards to the strategic planning meeting? Okay, hearing none. An update on our BIDA attendance report. I think we included this in the session because, and Attorney Lee, you can reiterate, we have certain members that have kind of reached the virtual meeting attendance policy, the maximum, and so we kind of need to kind of walk through that again as far as what will be excused if there are members coming vacations and you need to go back to.
I don't understand the question.
We were, in our attendance, we have certain members that have reached the max of the virtual meetings without an excuse in order to continue to vote.
In a
So-
virtual meeting.
In a virtual meeting, yes. So what we just need is a reiteration of the Georgia Open Meetings Act to state what is needed in order to continue, should members have to attend the meeting online.
I still don't know what the application of that is. The open meetings law, as I've mentioned at 2 different meetings, dealing with virtual attendance, has to do with the fact that if you don't have a doctor's excuse, you can only vote virtually 2 meetings annually.
Exactly.
If you have a doctor's excuse, then it does not apply.
Correct. So I think because we have certain members that are reaching that maximum, Sabretha, I think what I would ask of you is if in the attendance report, if once we do have anyone else attending virtually, if they are at that maximum threshold, for them to be notified and for us to be addressed during the meeting to let us know our order. Okay, if that concludes the discussion on the attendance report update, next we have our update for our GICC.
Okay, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
All right, first of all, before we even do a click, I'm going to do some updates. We're actually hosting a client event at the golf course on June 16th. So we're going to have DJs, we're going to have a shotgun start. Even if you don't golf, it's a good time to come over. We're inviting our clients from the convention center over to the golf course so they can experience what the golf course is like, so that when they bring their groups back, that they would consider booking an event over at the golf course. So I think Michelle sent out the invitation. Please RSVP if you all would like to attend, so we can get have the numbers right. And it's next Friday, and it starts at 4:30. Okay?
4:30 or 4?
Well, let's see. 4. 4. You're right. Okay. A couple of projects that we're working on. When you all came through the front, if you notice, we're doing a refurbishment of the sails out front. The sails are 20 years old, so we're having them power washed, then we're having them painted. We're doing new campus wayfinding signs, because when the signage was put around the campus, it was just us, and we were going to plant corn in the back, but now it's full. So we're having new signage so we can put the new hotels, put the Gateway Arena, and just talk about the whole campus. So that'll be completed soon. Also, if you look outside each meeting room, we used to have a digital board that told the client when their meeting started, when they're ended. We're having those upgraded as well. And we'll also have the boards that are working so people can check on their flights, see if they're on time, if they're running late. And there's going to be advertising opportunities on it. So those are my projects that I have. On July 14th through the 17th, and July 28th through the 31st, the traffic will be deterred. It will be on a detour from Camp Creek Parkway, from Friday night at 9 p.m. to Monday morning at 5 a.m. So this traffic is going to be sent through the campus, because they would be bringing over parts of the bridge to put over Camp Creek. So pardon me?
What is the date?
July 14th through 17th and July 28th through 31st. We had to work with the Department of Transportation, and we had to get everybody together, but they would be bringing over, because the bridge doesn't come in one piece. So they'll be, if you're driving down Camp Creek, you can see it coming out of the woods. So they'll be bringing pieces of the bridge over so we can get that bridge up and going. Okay? From 9 p.m. on Friday till Monday at 5 a.m.
Mercedes? I'm sorry.
We've also talked to the people with Delta, so they are aware. And if you all notice, when you leave the campus, right outside of the home-to-home suites, we put stop signs there. The chief is putting it on the agenda, so we have them covered up, because people are tending to drive too fast through the campus. So we're putting a stop there, and then there's a yield further up so that we can keep that traffic, stop people from driving through so fast and keep people safe.
Mercedes.
I've got a really dumb question.
Sure.
Has DOT or whoever's appropriate looked at the weight capacity for the roads back here? Because unless they're going to divert semis, are they going to destroy our road through Gateway campus?
It's in July, so we're not that busy over that time. And
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the big trucks coming through, destroying the road.
I don't know that they have done that. I'll find out.
That might be something to find out, because you might want to have those trucks diverted. I don't know how you handle that, because that's a major artery through there.
Okay, I'll find that out, because they can send them up Global Gateway to send them to Riverdale Road to get on the highway.
Yeah.
So I'll find out.
I wish I had thought of that before, but it just occurred to me.
Okay.
Mercedes, Now, the detour plan we got from C.W. Matthews with the map, it has different dates.
Yeah, that was
Those
for
those
June.
all changed.
Right, these are the
Okay,
updated
these are the
dates.
updated dates. So now it's July.
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Are they still planning to have that, the previous dates, we had 2 dates in June, and then a month later from the last date, they were going to do some final things and block off a lane or two.
Nope, that's
And-
why they moved it to the 2 dates in July, because we don't have a whole lot going on at that time, and they can do it in 2 weekends versus 30 days later.
And
Because
what's the new dates again?
July the 14th through the 17th, and July 28th through 31. And I will be sending it out, but I just want to give the BIDA board an update.
Yeah.
Okay.
I asked Jackson about that the other day.
Mercedes, I just have a question. So with all the events taking place, have you gotten to the point where you have reached capacity and had to turn away events?
We turn away events not because of capacity.
Okay.
Some of we just don't have dates.
Got it.
We have a lot of dates that sold out. So what I have been doing is to keep the group on the south side instead of just turning them down and say, no, I work with the Marriott. And I
Okay.
try to turn the business over to one of the hotels in the area just to keep the business on the south side of town. Because I would rather
Gotcha.
for them to meet at the Marriott than to go to the north side of town.
Understood.
Okay.
I really appreciate your update. Does anyone have any further questions
I'm not
for Ms.
finished yet.
Sada? Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Okay. Okay, this screen means a lot to me because, first of all, in April, it was 20 years that we relocated to this facility. Well, what I have been in this job as the executive director for 10 years this year in March. And when I came on as executive director, the convention center was making about $4.8, $4.9 million in a year. So part of what I told the staff was that we wanted to get to $10 million. And I think it's amazing that now we're over $10 million, and when we left COVID in 2019, we were at 9.8. So we finally reached our goal, which is a good thing, but we moved the goal up. So next year, we're gonna try to make $12 million. So every year, we try to move the number, but it's amazing to me that we would get the number after the hard time that we've had with COVID. So we're moving along. So the operating revenues for the convention center are at 122.8 of the budget that we had. For the arena, they're at 82.72%, and for the golf course, we're at 90.9%. As of the end of May.
Mercedes, how does the golf course revenue look now compared to what it did, say, several years ago before we put it together with the Gateway Center?
Well, I don't know what it looked like several years ago. I tracked from when I took it over to next year, but I can look at a 5-year span, but it's coming up.
It looks to me like it's higher.
It is. It is. Some of the groups that we had for May, for those that don't know, May was hard for the convention center. We had almost 18 graduations. So we did 6 graduations first we did Atlanta Area Tech in the arena, then we had 6 graduations in the arena, then we came up to the convention center. We had all of Clayton County here. We did 4 graduations a day. They started at 8 a.m. and the last graduation would move in at 8 p.m. And then we had Spelman College here. So there was a lot of people in this trailer during the month of May. So much that during the month of May, we made $190,000 in parking revenue. Okay, so all the groups that came in.
That's a lot of $10.
Huh?
That's a lot of $10.
Yes. The current events we have, right now we have the Atlanta Community Food Bank. They're having their conference here. The Unicorn Adventure is actually like the dinosaur show. So it's a show for kids and it's open to the public. We have the Win-Win Conference, which is a multi-marketing group. The Caribbean Book Fest. Then we have Got Soul Expo. That is the sneaker expo. They're coming back. The Atlanta Dream. For every dream game we've had so far, every dream game we've sold between $25,000 and $30,000 in food and beverage because most of their games have been sold out. There's the dinosaur show. We do our giving with the Hosea Back to School event. We have an IB Sports Management show. Office of the Bar is coming in July. I don't know what NAAGA is, but I should know. And then we have the National Funeral Directors and Morticians. And we got this group because during COVID, when nobody had business, we called the National Funeral Directors and told them we were available to do funerals.
Wow.
So once they came over, now they're going to bring their conference to us.
Okay.
Are there any questions? Councilman Clay, you asked me about the golf course. I can't get you an answer because it's right here in front of me. Last year for the golf course, right now we are up about almost $10,000 over last year. So we keep building on it. Before the client event, we sent the staff over there to do a deep cleaning. We are actually painting the deck. We had all the bathrooms repaired, and we're in conversation with Woodward about putting the umbrellas back on the patio. So we're gonna set it up like it's for an event so the clients can have a vision of what it looks like. Any questions?
Great. That sounds great.
And also for the arena, it's finally beginning to pay off. We are now advertising in the Billboard magazine, and we booked 7 concerts. Those concerts will start happening in September. And I think I sent that out to everybody. The Hawks are gonna do a preseason game here in October, which is great exposure for us. They're gonna do the Atlanta and Pelican game here. So that's all I have.
Mercedes, I'm sorry, one more question. You talk about concerts. I immediately assume loud concerts. Do you ever have any quiet concerts, like string quartet or classical or anything?
Not so far.
Okay.
No.
Well, what I was going to ask you, you know where I'm coming from.
Yes.
Has anybody ever complained about noise from aircraft?
No.
Okay.
Well, you can't hear any.
Yeah, right.
Well, the big thing that people do notice is that people are standing inside and they can see the plane flying over, and they don't hear it. And we always take people from the front where they can hear the planes coming in, then we bring them inside.
Yeah, I've had 1 or 2 people when I've been there saying, you know, you can see the planes out there, but you can't hear them in here. And I said, yes.
Right. And we are still working with the local vendor. We're working with Nouveau. They have one of our stands. So I think right now we have about 6 minority vendors that are doing concessions over in the arena. Questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. We really appreciate, as always, your service and the service of your staff. Our next agenda item is our economic development reports.
Thank you. I have a very short report this time. We've really been focusing on a handful of very intense LOIs this last month, so I don't have a whole lot to present. You know that we had 3 ribbon cuttings during May, the main course, the South Cottage, and of course, Eden's Garden that actually started at May 2nd or so. There is, sorry, thank you. I just did want to announce that June 22nd is when we're slated for our Tri-Cities Mixer, and it's going to be held this time at the Depot. And so we'll get you the flyer and distribute to that, so we hope you can join and also celebrate the new space that the Main Street Board has been working to update and improve. We went to the State of the Market event, which was an event that had all of the main developers and different real estate market, financing, lending folks. We made a few contacts there. We'll be doing some follow-up from that. Staff also attended a GIDA meeting that was in Athens. It was 2 days in May. And we have 6 new prospects that have been added to my pursuits list. As they fledge, that we flesh them out, hopefully some of them will turn into something worth bringing you details on and may develop into LOIs, but just letting you know that we had several meetings and got started far enough that we've added them to our pursuits list. I don't really have anything else unless you had questions for me.
Question? Sorry, I may have missed it. but the first item on the list, staff provided buyer alternative of the rezoned site behind Main Street. Does that mean that contract has failed with that site?
Yeah, I don't have the current status from all of that, so this was sort of just coming back through. That's my understanding, yes. So, because I checked in with Tasha, and I needed to reach out with that owner, that prospect buyer, but we haven't seen anything from them for over 2 years. So I need to.
The first one on your LOI list here?
Yeah, that was.
Actually, those items are for executive session.
Okay, so you're talking about
That's for
something-
executive session, that list. So can we,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
Michelle, I have a question for you. What time is the Tri-Cities Mixer going to be on the 22nd?
Oh, great. 6 o'clock is when it usually starts, but I'm going to have to get you the flyer. I don't have the official flyer yet.
Okay.
It usually starts at 6.
Okay,
Just putting it in my
is that
calendar.
it? Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle, very much. Next issue, for other issues, I only have one issue when it comes to notifications of the city events. I know we received the notice today, but the deadline for the RSVP was today. So I just asked for another, decorum courtesy for any events for us to be notified in advance when the original distribution. I don't know if we need to get added to a communications distribution, or
Just
how
to
does
let
that
you know,
work?
That was a discussion we were talking about in development committee this morning.
Okay.
Because there are so many different events all over the city.
Exactly.
And in the past, BIDA mainly got events that they were a part of, like developments or groundbreakings or something you voted on. And just recently.
Not all city events, yeah.
Right, and just recently you asked to, want to be included with anything going on in the city. So it's just a matter of us kind of coordinating with other city departments to let them know that you would like to receive it, because a lot of things we don't get to the last minute, but as soon as we get them, we send it out.
So we're going to be coordinating across departments,
Yeah.
all those who touch it. And for this one, it was so specific. So we meet with those of us who do PR, promotion, and marketing and sales. We meet once a month. And the golf event was so specific for the marketing vendors that our invite list was brokers, developers, and marketing vendors. So that's where it wasn't thought of as a BIDA event per se. It was, and not even necessarily a citywide. That is, it's not being promoted for all citizens to come. See what I mean, the difference? And so there was no slight intended on that. It was just what made sense for announcing. So Main Street Board was the same. They weren't considered on that first invitation because we were inviting the vendors and those who we were trying to market and have us help sell, or brokers or developers.
Madam
So-
Chairman?
Sure.
I hope that, it was no intention. But we want to improve that, that coordination, so all the different departments, right? Because police has their events, communications, and Parks and Rec is the big one, so that, and then our group as well. So yes, ma'am, we're working on
Got it.
improving that.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
being that this is my 5th year on BIDA, and the 5 years that I've been on BIDA, BIDA has been invited to, in the early years, we were invited to every single ribbon cutting, whether it was a city or if it was a business in the city. However, there have been a lot of changes in personnel and maybe throughout the city. Now, I'm not saying with Michelle, so it may be that department heads at one time, or but normally through economic development or working especially with Renee Coakley, who was our former Main Street manager, and Tasha was heading up the south side. We were informed, people say Jamel's all over the place, but that's because BIDA, being on BIDA, over these past few years, we've been invited to every ribbon cutting. So the ribbon cuttings, now other events that are not business related, we may not get invited to. But if it's anything that has to do with economic development and a ribbon cutting,
Yes.
we have been invited in the past.
And we share disappointment on short notice when we didn't get the notice on some of the ribbon cuttings.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
that
it
was
just
pretty
may be-
shocking. We were like,
What's
Yeah.
happened is, like I said, we have
Yeah.
new personnel and
well,
things, maybe
the
things that will
owners
come
did contact us. It was odd.
for the,
For some of these recent ribbon cuttings, yeah.
Got
and
it.
I think, like I said, we had a person that may have handled it through Main Street and through the South Side,
Yeah.
not
But we will
necessarily
coordinate
the economic development director.
Yeah, I think that the general consistency that I've seen throughout the years is anything related to economic development and business related, the invitation would go out accordingly to the BIDA members. You know, sometimes my motto is when things happen, first time, second time, it could be a mistake. It happens 3 or 4, it could be strategic. So we just want to make sure that we're included in those invitations accordingly. Thank you. So now we may take a motion to exit our regular session and enter into an executive session to discuss real estate and litigation.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Thank you. We could take a 3-minute break if needed.